What is up, folks? Welcome. I appreciate you joining us. I am Kevin Iole, joined by my friend George Zapata of the Zapata Brand Podcast. And we are going to chat about the fights. There is a lot to talk about, of course, as there always is in combat sports. George, UFC 305 is this weekend. There was a lot to talk about in the boxing world last week with Virgil Ortiz winning the world title over Sergey Bohachuk, and an unbelievable knockout in the Leo Lopez fight. So we got a lot to talk about. What's on your mind in combat sports right now?
Well, Kev, I think also the same as you, the UFC this weekend. Kind of anxious to see it. I don't know how Adesanya comes back from this. If if Strickland took a lot out of DDP in this fight, because although he won, he did take a lot of punishment. How he responds to that, and what kind? Usually fights that happen when there's a lot of heat like this, they don't end up well. They're kind of boring fights. But this one, I think, legitimately will be one of those ones that is good.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and we can get on talking about this maybe later when we get some questions. But, you know, I don't know if you saw the pictures of Adesanya. He has really changed his body type. I mean, he's really got a lot of definition. You know, he's got the washboard abs. And, you know, so he obviously had used that time that he's been away to kind of not only, heal his body and kind of get up, but he also changed his body. And I think that that is something that, we'll see how it plays out in the fight. But, Adesanya is a really talented guy. But I wonder, like you said, if this is not too soon. So we can get into that in a little bit.
Well, the Angelo Leo fight, I think was a great fight, knockout of the year, with Virgil Ortiz being possibly the fight of the year. How did you have that scored? If we can go back a little bit.
I had Virgil winning the fight. So what did I have it? I had it, I think it was 14-12. I had a 114, 112 for Virgil. So I thought he was winning most of the rounds. I thought that Bohachuk did really well. I thought he fought a really good fight. And, in a lot of those fights, George, I think what people forget when they're, they pick a side, whoever they think, and they make the argument for that side. There's so much that goes on. That's why they have judges on different sides of the ring, right? And those rounds can go either way. And a lot of times it depends on where you're seated. I know, like I have sat right on the ring apron, and sometimes, or here, let me even talk about what I do now, UFC fights. I'm sitting there in the first row, closest to the octagon, closer than anybody, right? And, the only one that's closer to me would be like Dana White, who's actually up against the octagon, but I'm in the first row right there. But, sometimes they're fighting and that big corner pad is in the way. And other times the referee is standing in front of us, or an ESPN cameraman comes over and they have a guy that carries this wire and there's two people there. And so you don't see everything. And that's why they put the judges on different sides of the ring, so everybody has good views. And sometimes, when maybe they're on my side of the ring and I can see a body shot and you can hear, oof, it really had an impact. And on the other side of the ring, maybe they don't see that as well. And so people score things different ways. So I think when a fight is close, like, Ortiz and Bohachuk were, I think that people shouldn't, be so quick to say robbery, or, they say it's corruption all the time just because they disagree with the decision.
The two knockdowns you didn't think had that much of an effect?
Well, I thought Ortiz was winning most of the fight. So, it took 2 points off. It would have been, I think it was an 8-4 fight for Virgil Ortiz. I could see 7-5. If you really push me, maybe I could see 6-6, right? But I didn't think that Bohachuk was doing enough in some of those rounds to win. And one thing people do, and I do it myself, so I don't want to, I'm not going to cast stones at anybody else without casting them at myself. But one of the things I think that people do sometimes is they look at the fight stats and they say, hey, look, here are the punch stats, and this guy landed and threw way more punches than this guy, so he should have won. But that doesn't really matter, right? It goes round by round. So let's say that the punch stats show that, fighter A lands, 150 punches in a fight, and he threw 1,000 punches in a fight. But if he landed 125 of those punches in one round and 800 of those punches in one round, that's not, he won that round, but he doesn't win all those other rounds, right? So it
Right.
can't really be used, the way people want to use it. I mean, it's a guide, and I agree that sometimes it's more efficient than others, but it's nothing that you can sit there and use to score a fight with. And if you are doing that, then you don't know what you're doing in terms of scoring.
Hey, speaking about judging, Coach Diz, I see, has a question in the chat about judging. And there it says, could we ever see AI judging at a fight? That's tough. That would be tough.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do that. I don't know, unless, I mean, if he could come up with something like that, you'd make $1 million. It's very subjective, and it's been this way for years. I think it's a tough thing to judge. It's like a thankless position, because if you're on the wrong side, they're going to question you anyway. That's what it is.
And here's the thing that, when you talk about AI judging, I mean, can AI judge the force of the punches? Can it, judge the impact that those punches are having on a particular fighter? And at least with the technology we have now, no. Now you see on, PFL on their fights on ESPN, they do have technology, how fast somebody threw a leg kick, or, how hard somebody threw a punch, and that type of thing. So I guess that's, on the way to kind of doing that. But I just look at that and I think that it's a little bit too nascent technology, and I think the human element deserves to be in there, because how do you say, like, what ring generalship is? It's kind of like the definition. Somebody was asked, and I forget who this was, somebody famous, so I apologize. What is the definition of pornography? And he says, I don't know, but I know it when I see it, right? And that was some politician, and I think that's the same thing when you say, what is ring generalship? Well, can you program that into a computer for a computer to say, hey, because that's a scoring criteria in boxing, right? Ring generalship. So I think that, it's an interesting question, and technology is going to play bigger and bigger roles in the sport. And look what it did in that Ortiz-Bohacek fight, right? I mean, technology, what was it, in the 7th or 8th round that they
knockdown.
And they said, hey, the knockdown in the first round, I called it a slip, but they looked at TV, the replays, and we've changed it, and we're going to call it a knockdown. So that was a big thing that technology did. The key thing is to get it right. And in a case like that, you still have to have the human element to look at it and say, okay, did a punch land? Did this person hit the ground? And the technology showed it, and then the human interpreted it. Can the computer ever do that totally by itself? Boy, I'll tell you, that's a tough one to me.
Right. Kevin, I had a question come through my community tab on the YouTube channel. It's specifically directed at you. He said, it's a good one. You seem to think John Jones will retire after a Stipe Miocic win. Why do you believe that? And is it something that you know?
I don't know anything specific. I mean, John has kind of alluded to, being close to it being the end. And, just my sense is that, he's been looking. John wants to prove to the world that he's the best fighter, period, not just the best light heavyweight. And he knows that, and obviously Dana White, and that is Dana White's thing these days, is arguing that John Jones is the pound for pound greatest in the world. We've gone over that, and we don't need to really go over that again. But John, beat one heavyweight, right? And he knows he needs to beat somebody else. So he feels if he beats Stipe Miocic, who is regarded by a lot of people as the greatest heavyweight of all time, that will enable him to then put to bed any questions. And I look at that and I say, beating Stipe Miocic in 2020 would have done that.
I said the same thing.
2024 doesn't do that.
Yeah.
But beating Tom Aspinall in 2024 or 2025 will do that.
I thought that too, because I thought a little bit of a past his prime Stipe, who's been on the receiving end of a vicious knockout back to back, and then not probably the ideal guy to say. And he was a great champion, don't get me wrong, but the time he was to fight him was 2020 before anything happened. Coach Rich is on the line there too, saying that he believes that it was a slip too. One other questions I had there from Amy from Freehold, New Jersey. In her prime, would Amanda Nunes have been a good boxer and possibly challenge someone like Clarissa Shields?
Yes, I mean, I think the problem with a lot of those fighters is that you're so far behind by the time you're in your 20s, right? So Amanda had all the technical aspects that are needed to be a successful boxer, right? She hit very hard. She was quick. She understood distance. She understood angles and all that. But she came up as an MMA fighter from the very beginning, and you're setting up your punches and setting up your strikes, not just your punches, but all your strikes in a different way than you do when you're in boxing. And you have to defend different things, so you defend differently. So when you try to make that transition, I think it's easier to go from boxing to MMA in one sense, right? But it's more, when you're going from the sport where you have to know all these disciplines into the one where you only have to be expert at one, that's where it becomes difficult. Mm-hmm. But I think the question is, Amanda started as a boxer when she was 12 years old or something. Would she have been a world championship boxer? I 100% believe she would have.
Okay, and I think we have a question there from Coach Diz back in the thing there. I'll put it up for you there. Kevin, can you give me your opinion on the opponent that Francis is fighting? Well,
I think this is an interesting fight. Francis is the favorite, and I think deservedly so. But Renan Fajeda is a 6'8", 265-pound heavyweight who hits hard and who has some jiu-jitsu. So I don't discount the fact that he could win the fight. If I had a pick today, and I've got 2 months to make that pick, but if I had a pick today, I would say I'll pick Francis Ngannou. But Francis hasn't fought in MMA in well over 2 years. It'll be like just a couple of months short of 3 years by the time he comes back. Coming off a vicious knockout loss to Anthony Joshua, that has to have an impact, and also the terrible tragedy, the gut-wrenching tragedy of losing his infant son Kobe. And just horrible, and your heart goes out to him. How is he going to react to all that? So there's a lot of factors going in here. If we take the child out of the equation, and that's difficult to do, as anybody who's a parent knows. If we take the child out, I think Francis is a deserved favorite. But there are some warning signs, George and Coach Diz, that I think when we talk about that fight, it's not just a fait accompli that Francis Ngannou is going to walk through Renan Fajeda.
I don't know. I just don't know how he's going to handle the comeback. Getting knocked out like that. I mean, granted, it was in boxing, and boy, that is a tough to come back with. Topple that with the kid, and I know you said that's something totally different, but number one, there's no playbook for losing a child. There's no playbook. Some people handle it. Most people handle it in a bad way, and they're never the same. They're never the same. But he's coming back off a knockout. You have to. I think he's jumping into the fire here. I wouldn't be surprised if he lost. I really wouldn't, just because we don't know what he's like now. And you're right. He hasn't fought in 2 years. 2 years about. What is he coming back as? Is he coming back the Francis that was UFC dominant, or is he who fought with a torn ACL and won a fight, or is he coming back by the scared like, oh man, I got knocked out. I better look at it differently.
And let's look at this, right? For all the praise that's heaped upon Francis, and deservedly so, he loses to Ciryl Gane if Ciryl Gane doesn't make that stupid mistake in the final round. I think that Ciryl Gane going for that takedown just gave the fight to Francis Ngannou, right? If he doesn't do that, Ciryl Gane's going to win a decision in the fight, and it was looking like he was going to win a decision in the fight. And then history is very different. So I think there's factors there that would make you think that that Francis is in trouble in that one.
Okay, we have a question here from Swerpo Boxing. Says at Kevin Iole, Gary Jonas.
Gary Jonas on the boxing team.
Yeah, Pro Box was on the Boxing Voice today and called out Turki Al-Sheikh. He said boxing's American street smarts, Saudi Arabian sports watching. He said September 14th, boxing and versus UFC. Boxing beats UFC 306. I don't think so. I think that was a big mistake for the Alvarez situation. But Kevin, what is your take on this whole situation here with Turki Al-Sheikh, Canelo, and them going head to head here on an event?
Well, let's answer the questions, and then I'll give you my take on them going head to head. I think it's kind of a easy thing to say American street smarts are better than Saudi Arabian sports watching, right? I think that that's an easy thing to say, and it really doesn't mean anything, right? Because each individual person is different. I have called out the sports washing before. I've written stories on that, but it's like I'm not gonna write. I've done that. I'm not going back there. It's out, and they are putting a full-on effort into making boxing a significant sport. They're not doing this out of altruism or because they love boxing. They're doing it because they want to have, the way I understand it, they want to create tourism, especially from British tourists who, can go to Saudi Arabia and stay there. And then also have some of the rich people that live in the UK retire in Saudi Arabia. That's kind of what they're trying to do. Hey, make this a destination. Make it a destination a little bit like Las Vegas, and then make it a destination for retirement. So that's what they're trying to look at the sports they're using. Right now they're involved in soccer and golf and boxing. Right. Well, what are maybe the three most popular sports in the UK? Soccer, boxing, and golf, right? So, it's clear where they are targeting. As far as the September 14th Canelo, I think both shows are going to do well. Now, I don't think the Canelo show is going to do well pay-per-view wise. I think it'll do a solid gate. Canelo is a Mexican superstar. There's no doubt about it. He is a big draw with those people, even though I think a lot of the Mexican fans are upset with him for the opponents that he has been facing recently. And certainly Edgar Berlanga, is not the opponent he should be fighting. There's no question about it that, this is a gimme for Canelo Alvarez. And I think Canelo could win this fight in the third, the fourth, whenever he decides to win the fight, he is going to win the fight. And I saw Rich said Canelo's on the Floyd playbook, cruise control. I defended Canelo up until recently, and I finally said no more defense of Canelo because, you look at who Canelo has fought throughout his career, right? Look at who he's fought. He's fought everybody, and there was guys that he fought that he didn't have to fight that were tough fights for him, like Austin Trout at the time, like Erislandy Lara at the time, and others that he willingly took those fights on. That told me that he was a badass, right? But having said that, I think now he's going to do things on his terms, and you're going to meet all his demands, or he is going to to do something different. So I don't like how he's doing. So I think the Mexican fans are going to buy tickets to see Canelo live. I do think you'll see that, but I think the UFC will also have a very large gate. It's going to be a huge night for the Nevada Athletic Commission. They're going to make a ton of money. And they're going to make a ton of money off the ticket sales that night. I think if I had to guess, I would say the UFC is going to do better on pay-per-view than Canelo does.
Let me ask you a question, and I didn't ask this to you real quick about the Turki Al-Sheikh thing. What is your impression of him getting into the Boxing Hall of Fame? That thing that they did there, is that too much of the promoters jumping in his pockets, trying to? It just seemed a little like it just turned me off a little bit.
I was on the board of directors of the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, and I'm not going to call out names of people that were in the room, but I'm going to tell a story. And so one year, I got into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame in year 2, which was too early. There were other people. And well, first of all, even let's back up before that. I didn't think media should have been in Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, right? I thought we should not have, I was on the original board. I didn't think we should have media in the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. I thought it should have been the people who competed and participated in boxing, the trainers, the fighters, those type of people, not people like me. I got inducted in year 2. And I had a personal reason that I wasn't on the board that year. So I was on the board in year 1, and then I was off in year 2, and they inducted me, and then I was on the board in year 3. So Tim Dahlberg of the Associated Press, had covered boxing for 35 years at that point. One of the best journalists in the country during his day. He's retired now, but he was one of the best journalists in this country. Covered all the big fights alongside of Ed Schuyler, who a lot of people, might have heard. And he didn't get in that year, and they put somebody else in who was levels below Tim Dahlberg. And I said, I tried to make the argument for Tim Dahlberg. And I said, hey, this guy is one of the best journalists, not just in Nevada, but he's one of the best journalists in the country. And the person sitting next to me, who was a former fighter, who is now in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, that person said, I've never heard of Tim Dahlberg. And so I got up and I walked out. I said, if you never heard of Tim Dahlberg, you don't belong on this panel. And I got up and I walked out. I was so upset about it. So that, they've made crazy decisions before. But I know the reason that they made Turki Al-Sheikh an honorary member was they wanted him to fund the dinner. That's what they wanted. They were hoping that he would put the money down to say, hey, I'm being honored here. It's a charity. And Michelle Corrales-Lewis and Rich Murata do a fantastic job. And they're both friends of mine. I love Michelle. She is awesome. But they are on a shoestring budget, and they were looking for Turkey to fund the dinner. That's why they did it. And that's the honest truth. And I know I'm going to have people on the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame mad at me for saying that, but that is 100% the truth. And he has not done nearly enough to be in yet. Maybe, down the road he should be, but up until that point, he was never even in Nevada in his life. Now he's in Nevada now, but he got inducted into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, never put a fight on in Nevada up until the point he got in. Like, what the hell are we doing?
I'd put Coach Diz in first before him. I could tell you that.
Oh, Fred.
Well, we got a bunch of questions coming in here, Kevin. All right, Kevin Iole, big salute to you, big bro. Watch out for the big IBO super middleweight world champ on Geez, he fight Saturday on Christian and Billy undercard. Do you know him? Have you heard of him? What's your opinions on that?
I think we will see how he looks on a big stage, right? You're moving up, and that's going to be, I think, a big stepping stone fight for him. So, I'm really interested in seeing how Billy does. I mean, Billy should beat Sergey Derevchenko, but everybody thinks Derevchenko's done. He's old. He's been around too long, and he's kind of like a cockroach. You step on him and you can't crush him, right? He just keeps going, and I think that's going to be. So I'm really interested on that card on Christian, because Christian is ranked way up there, and he, I hate to say it, but he becomes a potential Canelo opponent down the road if he wins, a fight or two more, and and Canelo doesn't show any interest in fighting either Crawford or Benavidez, and so to me, I want to see him, but I know that Iglesias is a talented kid.
It says here he beat David Morrell in the amateurs in Cuba, although David Morrell's stock has dropped significantly. Still a good win as an amateur.
Yeah, you beat David Morrell. You got talent.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. We got another one coming here. Let me talk the hard way. DDP and the UFC man confirmation Saturday night. Izzy made a big mistake. His own ego messed up in his head. He'll be taught the hard way. Never bite the hand that fed you. I don't know how that. I think.
Yeah, I don't understand that question. So Obi, why don't you explain what you mean? Because when you say his ego messed up, I mean he is trying to regain the championship. So I don't know
super
what you're talking about. Here. And when you say he bites the hand that feeds you, are you talking about his comments at the press conference about Francis Ngannou? I mean, I think he was right if that's what we're talking about. But if you don't mind, Obi, why don't you explain what you mean by that, and we'll get back to it.
Yeah, we got straight out of Jersey, Jay Z, my brother there with a super chat, $9.99. He says, "Great seeing Jordan Kevin, very knowledgeable at boxing." Our man, there he is. His channel, straight out of Jersey, is on the Zapata Brand Media, so we can have that. He's there. Let's see what else we got. Who? What do you think will fill the main event spot on UFC 307 in Salt Lake City? They're going back to Salt Lake City, first time in a while. Kevin, you got anything on that?
No, there's nothing right now to talk about, but there's no fights that, I was just talking to an MMA manager today for a story that I'm going to do, and there's nothing, no main event really that makes a lot of sense, which makes me believe we might see Michael Chandler in a fight on that show, right? I think Michael Chandler, you saw him soften his stance about Conor. He kind of basically said, yeah, the fight's not happening. And I think he's realizing all this time that he's wasted. So, Chandler may come back in a fight. I know Chandler's mentioning Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. I don't think either of those two guys, A, are coming back this quickly, and certainly B, I don't think Gaethje is interested in fighting Chandler again. I'm not sure about Poirier. I would doubt even Poirier is interested in that. But I think they can make a good fight, for Mike Chandler. So if I had a guess right now, I think we would probably, see Chandler versus X in the main event, with potentially a title defense by Zhang Weili in the co-main.
Oh, when did they pull the plug on this Chandler McGregor thing? I mean,
well, I'm going to have a column on that, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. So let's wait and see if we can, if you can go to keviniole.com and seeing anything.
Okay, coaches, are you concerned about Kara France fighting on this card being off 14 months due to a concussion?
No, if anything, I mean, I would say, that is it was great that he was off 14 months, right? I mean, I think too often these guys don't do that. I think you take the time off that you need, so that you get healthy and that you can compete again. The problem guys make is they come back too quickly. And I know Kai talked about it today at his media availability, the nature of how he decided to come back and everything. So I think Steve Erceg is really underrated, and I like Erceg in that fight against Kai. So, we shall see, but I think that I don't have any concerns about him specifically because of the concussion.
H Money Mob says, Kevin, I got Iglesias knocking out Christian and Billy. That's a tough.
It's a lot easier to say than do. So we'll see how both of them look on Saturday night.
That'll be the testing strip right there.
And then we'll go.
Dermachenko got the Ukraine Heart, 400 plus amateur bouts. Usyk to Bahacek year. Yeah, they both had good years, but you got to remember, Bahacek lost. He lost.
I mean, he won the title, right? He won the interim title by beating Brian Mendoza, and then he lost it. And I always find it funny that you're defending an interim title, right? I mean, isn't the purpose?
I know.
The champion is the way you win the interim belt, then you go fight the champion. But the goofy boxing organizations, that's kind of how that goes. By the way, I want to mention this, George, very quickly. Two things, actually, but I want to send prayers and love out to Mauricio Suleiman, the president of the WBC. His mom is very ill, and so we send prayers to the Suleiman family and hope that Mrs. Suleiman recovers and makes a comeback. I know she's very Mauricio's very close with his mom and his family, and so I just want to send love to the Suleiman family for what they're going through right now. Also, I want to mention I'm going to start doing these interviews, George, with the heads of the sanctioning body. So there's 4 heads of the sanctioning bodies, and the first one I'm going to do today. I don't know when it is going to be posted, but I'm going to interview Francisco Paco Valcarcel, who is the head of the WBO. Frequent golf partner of mine. I'm not going to say who's won more money, Paco, or who's lost money, but I'm going to have Paco on today, and that will be up, either tomorrow or next week. Going to talk about, the sanctioning bodies' roles in boxing and some of the ways that maybe we can get the sanctioning bodies to work together. And Mauricio Suleiman has agreed to jump in and do it with me. I haven't gotten agreement yet from Gilberto Mendoza of the WBA and Daryl Peoples of the IBF, but hopefully after they see my interviews that I did with the other two, that I'll be able to get them on. But I think it's going to be interesting for boxing fans to hear from them and hear how they look at things and the why they do things. We may not always agree with what they do, but then when you hear the why of what they do, maybe it makes a little more sense.
Does it? The one thing I will give you credit for, Kevin, you will push back. I mean, that is one thing. Your integrity has never been questioned. Do you ever think that there should be no sanctioning bodies? Just say, okay, let's wipe it clean, and somehow maybe do like the 5 families of the mob. You kind of have, okay, there's got to be one at the top. You have all this other stuff, but this one at the top who makes the ultimate decision, because you can't. You have interim, super, middleweight, platinum champion. So it's so chaotic. It turns you off a little bit.
Well, here, having covered boxing for as long as I have, right, and I have covered boxing in the worst possible era from the standpoint of recognition from the public, right? So boxing has been like this the entire time that I've been covering it. And so one of the things that I hear from fans all the time, I meet people out and they say, I used to like boxing back in the day, and then I know the but's coming, and it's like, but. And then they have their litany of reasons, and everybody has a couple of different reasons. Some people complain about the judging. Some people, talk about they don't think the talent is good. But where it always ends up, one of the things that always gets talked about is, I don't know who the champions are. There's this explosion of champions. So this year was great from the one standpoint. In the last couple of years, we've had the welterweight title unified with all 4 belts. We've had the bantamweight title unified with all 4 belts. The super bantamweight title unified with all 4 belts. The heavyweight title unified with all 4 belts. The super middleweight title. Who else am I missing? There's something else in there. But you see what happens. The IBF stripped Terrence Crawford the other day. Crawford just gave up one of the belts, right?
WBO. He gave up the WBO.
WBO belt. So, so now I've been referring to, Crawford as the undisputed champion. Same thing with Canelo. But, so basically, I don't know, I think we'd be better off without them, of course, but they're a part of boxing, and there's nobody else giving out belts, right? And so, and I just want to say this, and I don't want to get into a long thing about it, but some people might say, well, what about the ring belt? The problem that I have with the ring belt, and it cost me friends when I wrote a column on this, because people took it the wrong way. I was not impugning anybody's integrity when I wrote this, and it was over 20 years ago. I don't think journalists should be impacting who have championships, right? We should do our jobs, and we should write about who we think are the best and who's won fights that deserve title fights and blah, blah, blah. But we should not be crowning champions or dictating in any small way how much money they make. And of course, the higher you rank, the more money you tend to make and the better shots you get, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just the thing by me.
Okay, Kev, we got a bunch coming in here. I'm going to try to get to them as I can here. Okay. Any news on what's next for, obviously a Pereira, but maybe a Sakura? Pantoja.
Yeah, so Pantoja is the flyweight champion, Alexander Pantoja. I have not heard anything for Pantoja. If I had a guess, I think we're going to see Pantoja in Las Vegas in December. That is my guess. I think Escura is going to be, probably the opponent. But I was over UFC not long ago, talking to them, and he was not on their board.
Let me get this up here. Super chat here. With Dana White not loving journalists, have you ever kept him speak? How have you kept him speaking with you? I knew you aren't afraid to ask the tougher questions, and I appreciate it. Thank you. So smash that like button, guys. Green Do 0 OG 22 with a $9.99 super chat. And I will say this.
We appreciate it, brother.
Yes, I saw firsthand your relationship with Dana White. He respects the hell out of you, because I think you ask the questions too, and he could battle back with you. But you're respectful in the way you ask him, and you kind of have that rapport. And until you see it in front of you, like I did, you would not. You kind of don't understand that. People don't know the back side there.
Well, I have gotten accused many times of being on the payroll and whatnot, and for the record, I can say, that's bullshit, right? I've never taken any money, and I write what I believe. There was a time, like I remember Dana didn't talk to me in 2017. In fact, I'll tell the story. There was they had they called it the Fighter Summit. They used to bring all the fighters to Las Vegas and that was when Cyborg and Leslie Smith got into a fight. That was this big fight on campus. There was some shit talking going on. So I wanted to write something about the Fighter Summit, and I saw Leslie Smith stood up and she asked, Kobe Bryant was making an appearance, and Kobe Bryant talked to the athletes, right? And so I was, and nobody got this, but I was making fun of Kobe Bryant because he was saying, save your money and invest your money. And if you have an extra 10 million invested in real estate, I'm going, these people don't make 10 million a fight, let alone have an extra 10 million and so I was actually making fun of Kobe in this thing. But I also thought, Leslie Smith showed a lot of courage by standing up and asking a question with the UFC ownership in the room and Dana White in the room. And, she asked a very difficult question of Kobe Bryant. So I wrote a column on that. And Dana got mad at me and he called me up and he said, with everything that we did and everything that was going on, and that's what you chose to write about, I'm not talking to you. And that was in May, and he didn't talk to me until right before the McGregor Mayweather fight, right? And then, so I'll tell that this was funny what happened. Mayweather McGregor media was McGregor Media Day, so and was over at the UFC Performance Institute. So we were all up on the floor, and of course McGregor was literally like 6 hours late. And I had been standing there. We're on our feet. There's no seats. We're standing for 6 hours waiting for Conor. You're doing this and you're waiting. And then, then Conor shows up. So I have to write a couple of stories that day. So I literally was out like 12 hours. Now I get home. I've eaten no food. I get home and I write one story and I have another story still to write. And I decide, there's a McDonald's around the corner from my house. I'm going to go over to McDonald's and eat the food of champions. And I'm walking out the door. I'm in my car, and I get a text from Dana. And it's video. And I look at the video, and it is the full sparring session, not just the clip, the full sparring session of Paulie Malignaggi and Conor. And there had been that talk about, did Paulie knock him down or did he not knock him down? And, was that out? And so now I have the video. So I texted back, so it's the first I've heard of him in now, 3 months, right? More than 3 months. And he doesn't write anything. He just sends me the video. And so I wrote, can I use this? I wasn't sure if sometimes, he's sending it to me just FYI for your information, but was he sending it to me that I could use for public consumption? And I put it out, and it ended right then and there. But I think the reason that I have the relationship I do with Dana, to answer the question, is I've known him for since the 90s, right? Right, not long after he came back to Las Vegas after graduating high school. He went to Boston for a while, then he came back to Las Vegas. I used to see him at Golden Gloves Gym a lot in Las Vegas. And he knows that I will ask what I believe to be, the right questions. And he knows I'm not trying to play gotcha, right? If I think he's wrong, I will say I think he's wrong. If I think he's right, I will say I think he's right. That doesn't always mean that I am right in my opinion, because I'm a columnist and I'm allowed to give my opinion. But because of that, that's how why that's gone out there.
Okay, we got a couple here now. Sogi back on. Sogi Azul. He's always on with us. Kevin and George. Thoughts on Canelo versus Berlanga? I think it's going to be a one-sided beatdown in Canelo's favor. That makes Chris call Canelo a cherry picker. Berlanga doesn't have a solid jab, and I don't know if his chin can hold up either. That would be two very bad things.
He's a very good puncher, so that's the trifecta there. Yeah, Canelo has picked He's trying to take the easy pickings by saying, I want to use the Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry. That's a really bitter feud in boxing. You've had some of the great fighters in the history, greatest Puerto Ricans, greatest Mexicans fight each other, and they've led to some explosive, entertaining fights. This one's not going to be one of them.
Kevin, is a question from MMA Originals 1990. He says, "Hi, gents. Great job. In a different world where cross promotion exists, how would you think these two fights would be out? Aspinall versus Ferreira, and I can't even read that.
Alex Pereira, he means Poetan. That's his nickname.
Poetan versus
Nemkov.
Nemkov. Jeez, I can't even read that. I'd pay to watch that.
I think Aspinall is the number one heavyweight in the world right now. So I think Aspinall is really well rounded. I think Aspinall would handle Henin very well. Obviously he'd have to avoid getting caught. Fajeda's a really big puncher. And, we saw that, but, he fought Sergey Pavlovich, who was a really big puncher, and he managed to avoid that. So I would like Aspinall in that fight very strong, if that fight were to happen. And I think the same would be true versus Nemkov. I think Nemkov is a really good fighter, not fighting nearly as often as you want to see him compete. But I think, I think with Alex Pereira, he's kind of toward the end of his high-end career, right? I don't want to say he's toward the end of his career. I mean, that's BS. He's one of the top fighters in the world, but he only has a limited time left. He's 37 years old, right? How much longer does he have left? And I don't have his record in front of him. Nemkov is, I want to say 30, 31. So, but I would like Alex in that fight right now. If the fight happened 3 years from now, well, that might be a different story.
I think Nemkov might be a little underrated, to be honest with you. I think he's on the way up. I think he is a little underrated. Kevin, has anything ever come out with those allegations for Pereira? No, I've heard nothing.
No. Yeah, nothing that I.
Anything.
Yeah, so
wow, that was
weird. Police to really weigh in on that.
Yeah. Okay, going 15. Doomed to time. Okay, the sport was doomed. When it went from 15 to 12, it felt like the sport was doomed at the time. Counter Chris. Just a tough day, it was a promotional thing, money thing. Okay, at Kevin O. Hi. It's amazing to see Richard Cologne's hitting a heavy bag. That's an amazing story. Okay, is that the guy?
Richard Colonne was one that suffered the brain injury in the fight from Puerto Rico. Yeah, and I mean, he has shown unbelievable heart, unbelievable resilience.
Yeah.
And the people around him, and thank God for the boxing community for standing up and rallying around him, because a lot of people made a lot of money to help him, and he needed that. But God bless him for doing what he did, and I am really proud of him, and I'm really proud of the boxing community for the help that they have provided. Let me go back to Chris's question, right?
Go ahead.
The 15 rounds versus 12 rounds. It was done for safety reasons. But I think this is kind of like, we see all these Tommy John injuries in baseball, and these pitchers that, it seems like everybody has Tommy John surgery now, right? It's one point or another in your career, you're going to get it. And in the past, you had guys who would pitch 320, 315 innings, the really good pitchers were going like that, and they were going 8, 9 innings into games and whatnot. And I almost wonder if there's not a correlation there, right? And I think that, if you go 15 rounds, you got to train harder, you're in better condition. I think, some people were worried about dehydration over that long period of time. But I think the science is better now over that. So I don't think it would be as bad as others, if we went back to 15 round fights. I don't really think it hurts that much. The only thing I would say was going from 15 to 12. That's a true negative, is it makes it easier to get a draw, right? If you have a 6-6 fight, where if you went from 15 to 13 rounds, now, a little harder to get a draw.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Would you be in favor of it if you went to 15 for all the weight classes? I think The lower weight classes would be a little more difficult because there's going to be a way more punches getting landed than the heavyweights. I think something like 160 and up, maybe you can stay at 12 or go to 15. The ones down from 160 down, they land a lot of punches. That could be long-term stuff there, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. I think when you do that, you're really starting to, mess with the integrity of the sport. So I think either you do it like what I liked back in the day was like, so when I was growing up in the 70s, so I'm probably the oldest person on here, right? So, but like 10 rounders were main events, 12 rounders were special main events, and maybe regional titles. When they fought for the NABF title or whatever, right? Then that became, or the British title, that was a 12 rounder, and then 15 rounders were, world championship fights only. And there was that line of demarcation, and so you knew, where guys, were in their careers by the type of fights that they were fighting. I really like that quite well.
Okay, we have another one from Canada. Chris came up there. He said the WBC initiated and the IBF held out the longest. Is that? I believe that's correct.
Yeah, the IBF. So the WBC did it in the very short aftermath of Dooku Kim Ray Mancini. Right, that fight happened, and very short order after that, it changed. That was 1982. The IBF did not even come in to existence. I want to say 83, maybe. The IBF didn't get considered major until Larry Holmes, right? But yeah, so the IBF was born in the 1980s. We should look that up. Let me see here while I'm talking IBF history. And we'll find out what's going on. Let's see. Here it is. International Boxing, 1983. Yeah. So Dooku Kim and Mancini was 82, and then that the IBF was formed in 83. And so Larry Holmes was the WBC champion, and then he had an issue with the WBC, and the IBF got credibility because Larry Holmes was widely perceived to be the best heavyweight, and he went over to become the IBF champion, and that kind of gave them the credibility to go forward.
Now, I saw something up on here that Coach Diz wrote. It's a little off topic, but when we were in Vegas, the traffic there, and it was last week. It wasn't a lot. But he had asked about the NBA team and the baseball team coming there. Then you got the fights there. Are they doing something with this traffic? That's going to be tough. That is going to be tough, man.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really difficult. Like, I was really worried, and I'm being proven correct. The Golden Knights play at T-Mobile Arena, the NHL team, and a block and a half down behind the T-Mobile Arena is Allegiant Stadium. And they didn't build any new freeway access. There is something being built on Tropicana now, which is where the baseball stadium is going to be. But this was in the works for 4 years. This thing has been going on 4 years. So this has nothing, what's being done right now has nothing to do, with baseball and the fact that we're going to have a baseball stadium on Las Vegas Boulevard. So for people who don't know Las Vegas, the area of the Strip from Sahara to Tropicana, that, couple mile stretch, that is referred to as the Strip. Everything else is referred to as Las Vegas Boulevard. And so, the stadium is going to be right there fronting Las Vegas Boulevard. But this Tropicana interchange that is now causing so much, traffic tie up, which you saw when I picked you up in Las Vegas, that was because of the construction at Tropicana, right? That was just that one area. So I think it's going to be nuts. Now the NBA stadium that is going to be built is about a mile or two south, and that's down at Blue Diamond, and so that's far enough south, and there is arteries leading into that in all directions. So I don't think that is going to be the traffic nightmare that you could see, and I've seen it on a Sunday afternoon, like, the Golden Knights have played games, at 5 o'clock on Sunday, and the Raiders have played one. And so I'm coming to the Golden Knights game, and there's people, because the Raiders are always losing. People leaving the Raiders game while the game is in the third quarter, right? So.
Yeah, no, when I was there, I hadn't seen traffic like that in years, and I was like, how long? Because you don't live that far from where I stayed. But it's still 30 minutes to get to where I was staying. That's a nightmare of a drive, a nightmare. And I don't know if adding all those other people on there into the mix, I don't know, man. That's a turn off for me. But I'll tell you what, the Uber drivers are gonna get their pockets full. That's for sure.
Yeah, I told you the story last week. I might as well say it now. Teofimo Lopez fought Jermaine Ortiz at Mandalay Bay the Thursday before the Super Bowl. And I pull into the parking garage, and I got lucky because as I pull into the garage for the Lopez fight, the parking attendant recognizes me, and there's 3 parking attendants. And as I pull up, he's going to tell me the garage is full. And I roll down my window. There's usually, there's a ticket machine. You take a ticket to pay for parking. The guy comes over and is going to say, we're full. And then he sees it's me. And he goes, "Oh, Mr. Iole, we have 1 parking spot left in the garage." So so how do I know how to find this 1 parking spot in the garage? So the guy gets in the car with me, puts me in, and then the other guy stays at the gate. And so I was able to drive and find the parking spot, and it was right by the entrance to the arena. So it was like the best parking spot there was. If they didn't recognize me, I would have had to park like 8 or 9 miles away and Uber back.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough gig there. But they are building that place up to be good or bad. Gambling is going to take over this sports world if it hasn't already. To a point where you're going to be gambling at your seat at these events.
Well, you can already do that. I mean, at least I don't know another place, but you can do it here in Las Vegas. You can go now. Golden Knights games, they don't have it at your seat. I think it's going to unless you have your phone and you can bet on your phone at your seat, but they're going to have things that are attached, built in, that if you want to bet, you don't even have to use your phone. You just go on there. Yeah, that eventually it's
going to be lightning speed fast, and that's what's going to happen. Okay, we got another one here. We got a couple more to go here. Okay, Kevin, what's the easiest way for me to understand or benefits of the whole IOC versus IO baby, the transgender boxing? Now, we didn't talk about that.
This is pretty easy. So, even though it's controversial, it is pretty easy. So the person, there was 2 fighters that were in question here. And there was a Chinese fighter and the Algerian fighter. I don't remember the names. So I apologize for not knowing their names. The issue was that both had Y chromosomes in tests that was given to them by the AIBA. IOC used a different set of criteria that were put in, and both of these people were not transgender, and that got out there. And I don't know how that got out there, but they were born females, and with female genitals and the whole 9 yards. And so that's why they were allowed to compete. Now, I think maybe they have to look at the rules, right? And I think you say if you are born with a Y chromosome, even if you have female genitals and everything else, you cannot compete as a female. But the rules were clear that wasn't the case now. And so under the rules that the IOC used, they were allowed, both of these women were considered women and were thus allowed to fight. It was a totally different thing. Like if you remember the MMA fighter Fallon Fox from a few years ago, that was Fallon Fox was a transgender person. And so there's an entirely different argument there. These people are born with female genitalia, and they, so they competed as female. But I understand the argument, and I believe that, that's got to be a point of discussion. If you have a Y chromosome, which I guess happens in a very minute amount of women, then they can, they can do up, they can make the rules and say how they want to do them. But I just kind of, that they have to take a look at that. That's something that needs to be looked at. But it was fair because of the rules were clear.
Has this ever happened? Not only just boxing, in any sport that you've known of, that someone had a Y chromosome and competed as a female? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't know of it, but it becomes a factor in boxing because of and by the way, Chris wrote AIBA got canceled. The problem was the reason boxing may not be in the Olympics is AIBA was inept for years, corrupt, inept, and all sorts of bad things. And forget this issue with this particular fighter. AIBA was freaking awful.
And they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves.
The spot that they're in now. The IOC is freaking corrupt, and they're taking the sanctimonious route against AIBA because that's how freaking corrupt that AIBA is, right? So we're better off without AIBA, but I hope that there's a federation that does get recognized by the IOC because that's what has to happen in order for boxing to be in the Olympics in 2028. So it wasn't quote unquote cancel culture or anything else. It was just, AIBA's corruption and incompetence, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, they weren't corrupt, they were just freaking incompetent. They got them booted out and left boxing in a position where it's fighting for its life to remain in the games. I just can't understand how you can have breakdancing being a medal sport and you're not going to have boxing. But boxing people did it to themselves, and that's why the pro boxing is the mess that it is. And the amateur boxers did too. And amateur boxing organizers did too. And so they got what they deserved.
Yeah, I'm pretty deeply involved in the amateur circuit. It's, they you're right. They do it to themselves, and then they wonder why. They have all these barriers up too that make it difficult to coach and do stuff. And when you look at it in the long term, boxing should be an Olympic sport. You should have it there. It is the oldest sport because that's how we defend ourselves with our fists. Why is it not included? It's because they did it to themselves. And I'll always say that it's been corrupt for years. It's always this way. It trickles into the professional ranks. The only thing with the professional ranks is when you come in, the entry level is a pro. You could just literally walk across the street, pay your $25, and you're a promoter, a manager, and a boxer.
USA boxing is also awful, right? And think of the Olympics. So I wanted to talk. What's the kid's name? Craig, that won the bronze medal. I wanted to talk to him during the Olympics, and they have a policy: unless you're in Paris, you can't talk to him. So they do nothing to get these kids publicity, positive stories. There are a lot of professional boxing writers who there were fights going on here that we had to cover that we couldn't go to Paris. And, I've covered the Olympics, before, and I know what it's like. Access is terrible, but USA boxing sucks. And, why not call me and why not call Mike Coppinger at ESPN and Dan Raphael and, and other, Lance Puckmeyer and say, hey, here's some good stories. Call us a year before the Olympics, call us 9 months, call us 6 months, and say, here's some stories that are going on, and actually promote these kids that are coming up so that the public knows who they are. But they sit back and they're like, oh yeah, we'll see what we can do. And you can't talk to the Olympic coach, and nope. It's just nuts. And
Kevin, I tried that. I tried to say, hey, Ireland was coming over here to fight in Scranton. And it was gonna be us versus them, and I wanted to cover it. I want to go. Hey, I'll cover it for you guys. I'll come out there. I'll do no live streams, But how do you get these guys out there? This is a social media business now. It really, the fact that we have no superstar like Mayweather superstar, and social media is so readily available is beyond me. Beyond me. It should be in the forefront of everyone who loves boxing's news feed and their Instagram. Period.
Well, you know what? Like, why? I'm going to say this. Why did I write about Teofimo Lopez so much when he first turned pro? Because I saw that kid fight in the Olympics, and I said, man, this guy is going to be a good fighter. And I saw him in the stands, and we met each other in the stands at the Olympics. He was an American kid representing Honduras. And I talked to him, and I thought, boy, I'm going to follow his career. And I try to follow all of the top prospects as they go into the pros. It's not always easy, especially depending on what card they're on. but I made it a special point to make sure I saw Teofimo Lopez's fights. And so I did a lot of coverage, and he and I got to be close. And I think he would tell you that we're close right now, as a result of the Olympic experience, but nothing thanks to garbage USA boxing.
No, and even Daily News Golden Gloves change their names, Ringmasters now. They're getting away from that stuff. I can remember when the Golden Gloves every year would come out in April, we'd go through the Daily News and find out who's fighting who. Can't see any of that now. Can't even see that now.
Yeah, it is really sad. I mean, and so I look at it this way and I go, how hard would it be? Like calling me and calling Mike Hoffman or calling Dan Raphael is not that hard. Is that going to solve all of the problems? No. That's not going to do that. But what you're going to do is if you get us, to write about some of these people, and then, we're aware of them and we can tell their backstories, and then the public can read it and say, hey, I want to see this kid fight. And now I know, hey, I had a lot of people coming to KevinIole.com to read about, amateur boxer. I'm going to make sure that I put a thing up. Hey, remember, Joe Blow is fighting tomorrow at o'clock on CNBC. Make sure you watch his fight. But these guys become, nobody knows who they are, and it's just awful, and so Chris has I'm not familiar with Boxing Canada, but obviously it's a shame the way it's gone, and I just think
you haven't even heard from that. Canada used to have a couple good fighters come out of Canada in the amateur ranks.
Fighters, like they still do.
Yeah, you haven't heard of that, but you said it's due to the leadership at the moment. Boxers petitioning for changes. Well, I mean, they don't get paid, so I mean, even like the NIL, they don't even do that anymore. We have another Kevin Salute, Kevin Iole, right there. He's the GOAT. He said he's the GOAT from Sunchild. Evidently, he hasn't heard of Dennis, Coach Diz. Okay.
Yeah. What's
Diz.
The question?
So okay, I just want to say the code. Thoughts on Muhammad Makachev?
Makayev.
Oh, why? I can't even see these words in front of me. I need my glasses. God.
And Kevin, anybody no glasses on Kevin? Yeah. So Muhammad Makayev, for people who don't know, was the UFC flyweight who is undefeated. And his contract ran out after his last fight. He fought Manel Kape. Not Dana White, but the matchmakers hate his freaking guts. They said he is a pain in the backside and was causing them no end of trouble. He was getting fights in the PI. He'd be there training or eating lunch, and he would see other fighters, and they would get into fights, and he was causing. I don't know all the specifics. I just know, they say so. The matchmakers, Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby, and to a lesser degree, Hunter Campbell, who was the chief business officer, they went to Dana and they said, we're done with this kid. We, no matter how good he is. And so the UFC said they weren't going to re-sign him. Makayev said recently he would fight for free. And Dana, Dana said, we're not interested in him, and we've moved on. So, it's a shame, because I think Makayev was a good fighter, or is a good fighter. And then Ray Setho at the PFL, actually said, we hear that Makayev is a pain in the ass. He used that exact word at a press conference. We're not interested in signing him either. So, there you have it.
That's not good. This is David Cadena. He is actually a frequent commentator on our stuff. And a matter of fact, I think he has a relationship with Ryan Garcia, if I'm not mistaken. He said Oscar De La Freddy attempted to help the Olympics in boxing. I do remember that. They were left dumbfounded, frustrated. I'm telling you, when Canelo retires, then what? Yeah, it's a sad situation. I see it all the time. There's some stuff I'll tell you, Kevin, about USA boxing over this way.
The thing that's bad about this, David and George, there are a lot of good things going on in boxing now. There's a lot of good young talent coming into the sport, right? And so we should be in a really high time in the sport. But, all the goofiness that boxing does, and, it all stems from there's no business model, right? So anybody can get in. So if you live next to somebody, if you happen to be a boxing person, whether you're smart or not, whether you know what the hell you're doing or not, whether you're a good business person or not, and you have a kid next door to you that happens to be a special talent, and he comes under your wing, now you're going to be with him his whole career. And you may be the right person for him, or you may not be the right person for that person. And the barrier to entry in boxing is non-existent. And anybody can be a trainer, anybody can be a manager, and it doesn't cost that much to be a promoter. You do have to be bonded by most of the states that go out there, but it doesn't cost that much, relatively speaking. And, like all these companies come in and we're going to spend money and we're going to be, and they all go away because they realize how difficult it is. So, if there was one organization, and it's a worldwide sport, and we have to remember that people in the United States often say, if we had a national commission, well, yeah, that would help in the United States, and certainly that would be better than nothing. But boxing is a worldwide sport, and there's different laws in different countries. But if there was something like FIFA, right, that FIFA runs soccer, and if we had that kind of thing that would run boxing worldwide, and that there's an arbitration panel and there's rules and there's rankings that are put by the people who were set up, and not because you got wined and dined at a sanctioning body convention, right? But that's what happens, and so that's my problem.
And no accountability. So, what does anybody care?
So,
well, Kev, we're wrapping it up here at 5:00. Any
you
more
are
coming up?
Today, I heard.
What's that?
You're a busy man today.
Today is like my week. This week has been the week from hell. Started with the plane ride home, and it's just been nonstop. Everything's been, the kids with football, and one's has football. They're having kids over the house. Jackson is going to the Little League World Series tomorrow. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this area right now. Parts of being a dad, you know what I mean? So you got to do those things.
George, we got to give our if you like iced tea.
Yes, it's a Gold Peak. I go with the Pure Leaf tea. Hopefully they can reach out to
Kevin. My commercial. Coca-Cola. He doesn't need an ad. Just me.
Yeah, so just go to keviniole.com to sponsor him there. That'll be good. That'll be good for you. Me, I got Ringside. Ringside sponsors me, so it'll be good.
We'll see you guys.
All right, Kevin, I'll see you this week, or I'll give you a call later on.
God bless. Appreciate it, everybody.
Guys, thanks for commenting, guys. Appreciate it.